In this episode of the IT Experts podcast, we're going to be helping you to recruit the right people in your MSP, the right guys and girls who are going to stay in your organization. They're going to help you deliver great customer service as we talk to John and Ben from JLA Resourcing. Welcome to the IT Experts podcast, the only podcast to help IT and MSP business owners build that profitable business by simplifying business growth. So welcome to the show. And today we've got John and Ben from JLA Recruitment, and they are tech and MSP experts in terms of recruitment. And what we're going to be learning today is we're going to be tapping into their knowledge to find out what on earth is going on out there at the moment with regards to the recruitment space, getting great staff, keeping great staff, interviewing, how to get that interview, how to make the selections and all of those types of great things. So this is the first podcast we've ever done in a triple flavor, a bit like a Neapolitan ice cream. So welcome to the show, guys. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ian. Yeah, nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I consider myself the chocolate ice cream, if that's where we're...
No, yeah. I'm going to go for strawberry. Sorry,
thank you very much.
No, that's absolutely fine. So look, guys, this is really interesting time right now. At the time of recording this show, it's December 2020. We've had an interesting year. We've got people who are on furlough. We've got businesses who are kind of struggling with what's going on. That's extending out for another 3 months out into March. We've got a lot of business change going on. We've got Brexit as well. Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's all kind of coming in at once. Ben, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown on what you guys do, kind of who you help, and maybe then we can jump to John and just say, look, let's have a little look at what the landscape's looking right now, how you guys are actually feeling everything. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, it's very interesting times at the moment. In terms of what we focus on, a good chunk of the market that we work with is the MSP and solution provider space. Our kind of core offering is around cloud infrastructure, security, service management, service delivery, and then project management and program management type roles. And even within that, there's lots of disparities in the market at the moment as to what's busy, what isn't, and we'll probably go into some detail on that in a bit. But it's not all doom and gloom out there. And I think what customers need to be aware of is that some of these roles are still highly in demand. And I think everyone thinks that because the market as a whole is quite depressed, that they can under offer, they can attract easily and things like that. It's not like that. The good candidates are in work. It's still difficult to recruit. And that's where, we're going to come in and hopefully add value to that process.
Okay, John, what's the landscape looking like, for kind of the next 3 to 6 months, and how are you finding things right now?
Yeah, I think Ben touched on it. I think what you've got to realize at the moment is technology has avoided some of the impact, the wider kind of publicized impact. But at the same time, it's not the same state it was 12 months ago. I think the biggest difference we're seeing is organizations where very fast-paced, very clear transformation programs in place, digital transformation programs that they expected to be driving on with in the this year and the following year and such like. The transition to cloud was already happening. The upskilling and increasing of cyber capabilities and such like was happening. What this year has done is, I think, more so at a C-level, it's kind of made people put a pause on it and say, wait a second, we've got to firstly turn our attention to how the hell do we make our majority of our business remote, and that's driven an initial peak in demand in certain aspects. And then they've gone, okay, let's hold fire on this transformation, because actually, do you know what? It probably looks completely different to what we thought it would look like 12 months ago. So, and what that then spins out as in a recruitment sense is, actually, we're not really seeing volumes of redundancy like other sectors. You're not seeing people losing their jobs like other sectors, and you're seeing stability and people holding on to those skills. But what we've not got, that we were very much in the midst of and have been in the midst of for a few years, was kind of quite rapid growth, and there's that sense of, yes, we still want to invest in tech. Yes, we're going to need the skills. Yes, there's going to be a demand there. But there's a bit of hesitancy as to when. Is that going to be early part of next year? Is it going to be 6 months on? Is it going to be 9 months on? So we've not seen it go backwards. We've then just seen kind of gradual, more kind of steady growth. But what we were on previously was quite a sharp trajectory of growth, and that's definitely kind of appears to be held. There's obviously odd exceptions, as there's always going to be, but that's the general pattern.
And I guess it's that time where people now need to take stock, look at we're in tech. So look, we're in a great place in terms of, in March, your granny didn't probably know what an iPhone was, and she's now ordering her shopping through it and things like that, which is great. And, the demand on the internet, the demand on the reliability of great connectivity and all of those types of good things, and having good, hardware, it has never been more. But I've got a client who works very heavily in the airline industry. Now that will come back.
Yeah, of course it will.
But and they can't get rid of them. It's not like a hotel. You can't just shut an airline. It just doesn't work like that. And we're looking at planning around how do we make sure that we can help more airline industries, within that particular niche, or more airline businesses. But it's helping them understand. And I think there's going to be, I kind of see the beginning of next year is going to be a call for experts. How do we deal with this change? How do we now deal with, the stability? Because remote working, you touched on it there, John, remote working. Okay. There's lots of stuff going on around kind of like well-being, employee engagement, and all of those types of things. And it's a really hard thing for a lot of people to do. Yeah, the techies are all going, yeah, it's great. And everyone's saying, yeah, it's okay. It's great. Well, it's probably great because you still got a job. But, as we were talking in Mastermind this week, the water cooler, to use the American terminology, is where innovation happens. The photocopier is where the ideas come up with, where you're standing there going, why don't we do this? Or why don't we do that? Those conversations and those types of, environments are not kind of taking place. So
I think with regard to kind of like staff development and coaching, it's not necessarily like a formal training environment where you get most of your skills. It's the person sat next to you that says, oh, next time you do that, why don't you think about solving it this way? Yeah. And those are the bits that I think that's the challenge for business moving forward now, is how do you keep that development, that culture, all of those kind of aspects moving forward. I think it's going to be quite tricky and something that we need to solve.
Yeah. Well, we can certainly help them with that, because we love a little bit of leadership, as you all know. So let's get into the meat and the bones of today. Let's talk about a business. They've decided to make a hire. So they're overwhelmed. They need to expand their tech team. They need to expand their marketing team. They need to expand, some of their admin team. Where should people start? What should be the thought process that goes through their minds when they say, right, we need more people. This is what we need to do.
I'll jump in on this one to start with. I think it's not necessarily just because of now. It's always been the case. But the first thing companies need to do, especially in the tech world, is come to accept that they have a choice. If they want a medium to average level of hire, I don't know who does, but if they do, fine. They can adopt maybe a bit of an old school attitude of people will be grateful for a job. But what we urge, and we really encourage all of our clients, is actually there is a skill scarcity still. Take tech especially. There is a massive skill scarcity for the really high caliber, high quality people. Mm-hmm. So what your first thing is getting those involved in the recruitment process, your business, into the mentality of, we need to work hard to attract talent. Step one. And I know that seems really obvious, but there is a lot of organizations who are really passive. They don't engage enough in the recruitment process. They don't work hard enough to think, how do I sell myself? How do we sell ourselves as an organization? Are we tapping into not just the monetary needs or the technology needs, but also the emotional needs of the market?
Yeah.
And so you can rest on your laurels, you can get average, but if you want the best, that first part is, the term is, there is a war on talent for the best caliber. Therefore, you've got to arm yourself at the beginning before you start and make sure you're aligned for that. And there's multiple parts that you've got to look at on that front, but I guess it's that mentality first that you've got to really think about.
And to jump in there as well, John, I think really what we do is we're looking at two different types of talent pools. So there's the active job seekers, those that are on LinkedIn, they're looking for jobs, they're on the job boards and applying. And then there's the passive people that are relatively happy in the job that they're doing. And generally, the best fit is going to be someone that's probably doing the job already and isn't particularly active in the market. And again, that may vary due to the time that we're in and really good people being available and having, being forced to look. But what you've got to do is, if you want to just focus on people that are active in the job market, you're probably going to be able to get someone. But if you want someone who's the absolute best fit for the role, that's where we need to work hard and attract those passive seekers. And that's where we need lots of marketing. People need to understand the brand, the values, why someone will want to come in and join you as a business and what's going to make them stay and stick.
And I think that, when we look at the cost to hire, I don't know what it is at the moment, but I'm sure it's easily, four, if not five figures by the time you've done the training, the induction, the 3-month probationary periods and all of that types of stuff. And then you hear people say, no, it didn't work out. It was a load of crap. No, this didn't work out. That didn't work out. Now, the first thing I normally do is I want to say, okay, well, what was their performance management? How did you set their goals and objectives and all that sort of stuff? And then you normally get I think what we're talking about up here is getting the grunt work right, so we don't have those conversations, so that you end up having to let people go because they think I'll get someone in if it doesn't work out. Well, that's going to be, what do you reckon the cost to hire is in terms of work out?
We always thought the cost of a bad hire was 3 times their basic salary. So if you've got a decent engineer on 40k, but they leave after 4 or 5 months, you're probably looking at about 120 grand's worth of cost. So that's not only the recruitment cost, onboarding, salaries, but all the time taken to train that person, all the loss of productivity for the manager who's had to kind of embed them in the team and then they've not worked out, and all the cost of things that you've got to then repeat to get someone back in. So a bad hire is extremely costly to a business.
Right. Okay. So we've got we found out who who we're going to go and target. What's the next steps in terms of the decision process before we even go out there and start looking?
Step 1 is think about the profile of that person you're trying to hire. Think about, we all know that in tech, there's different types of expected profiles. We know what we expect of most software developers. We know what we expect of a project manager, of a program manager. So then try and take the time to sit down and think, what are the things they're likely to be engaged by? Is it the tech you're using and the opportunity they have to work with that? And why is it interesting how they get to use that in your organization? Mm-hmm. Or is it actually the cultural fit, the team collective, the opportunity to make change in their industry? Give that real consideration, and then go away and say, okay, what content do we have available which allows us to portray that, right? It doesn't need to be big flashy marketing or anything like that, but have they sat down and said, right, in this recruitment process, in this search process, we want to target software developers. So we know we want to be able to pinpoint the tech we're using. We want that talked about up front. We want to be able to pinpoint the stuff we're developing. Maybe we can give them exposure to what that might be, to really draw them in and give them something to kind of get their teeth into and feel is more tangible. Don't just think we're going to hire, I'm going to write a job spec. It's a list of requirements of what that person needs to be. That's the big flip, is stop thinking about what the person needs to be as the priority. Think about what you are, what you're offering that person, and then think about what their skill set needs to be. That's step 1 for us. Ben?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think, have you definitely got the content that supports that? Now, one of the things that we do is we like to video interview the line managers that we're working with.
Okay.
Actually have that. So as a minimum, it means we can go out to candidates and we can target them and we can actually show them like a real example of what it's like to be in that business. You've got the manager there talking to you about why it's a great time to join, what the products are, how they work with their clients and so forth. So things like that are really good in terms of getting people engaged and getting them wanting to work with the business.
So what we're really talking about here then is it's about making sure that we've got the values and the culture and the attitude of these people, kind of right, because we all know that, whether they're using ConnectWise, Datto, whether they're doing something on a project basis or whether they're working with any of the other systems, kind of know how they work and what good looks like there, but it's whether they can fit in with the team, isn't it? That's really key.
Yeah. And that's where the interview process becomes really important. But I think, definitely before you do that, it's getting that job spec fully nailed and really thinking about what is essential and what's just a nice to have. It's so easy to kind of keep going with the job description and keep thinking, we've got Dave already doing this job. This is exactly what he does. Well, in terms of bringing someone in, did Dave come to the table with those skills when he joined the company, or did he come in and learn a lot of those products? So what's absolutely fundamental for the success of that person on day one, just stick to those points, I think is really key.
How to find more Daves. That could be a little
that's such a common thing that we get though, is that client come to us and if we've placed someone with them before and they're like, he's working out really well, just get me another one of him. It's like that doesn't work. We've got to move away from that. We've got to look at what this particular job needs to do.
It's about the function, isn't it?
Yeah.
And another step we then advise as well is don't be presumptive on the salary front. There is so many ways in which you can go out and benchmark your role early on. There are tools available. An example is IT Jobs Watch, right, which is an aggregator of all of the adverts for roles on the internet, for example. Okay. And yes, it's not going to give you 100% accuracy, but it will give you a sense of what the market is. It gives you trends. Don't assume that a role that was paying X amount 6 months ago is necessarily expected to pay the same amount now. Yeah. And also, I go back to it, understand where you're trying to hire within the skill set. Sometimes you don't want to hire a rock star, sometimes you need someone who's actually just solid and stable, and so then look at your benchmark in that sense. If you get someone who is better than what you're expected for that price, brilliant. But don't go in there thinking, well, if I chip in a little bit lower and then just keep pushing, I might get hired. Why leave it to luck? Know what your price point is. If you don't use the tools themselves, I'm sure you could speak to people doing the role already. You can speak to agencies or supply chain if you have them, get them to come and evidence that for you. But I guess a lot of people will kind of, again, work on that element of, we paid this much 2 years ago, that's what we're paying now. And it makes the whole thing very challenging for them, because then they're not getting the caliber of what they want come through the door, and wasting time to eventually realize maybe that was the root of the problem.
I mean, the thing what people do is they look at, I only want to pay 25, 35, 45 grand, whatever it is. But in actual fact, if that person's going to come in, and as you say, it's going to be one of these rock stars and add an absolute boatload of value, then you'd be paying them even more, because it's kind of you always need to get a return on investment on your staff costs. And if, what people are probably tending to do at the moment is maybe go a little bit heavy or keep hold of their staff costs, because they're either pivoting their business model, so they understand sort of like which different clients they're going to try and attract.
With that, Ian, sorry to interject there. With that, I think companies find that easier to quantify if it's a revenue generating role. Yeah. So if you've got like a salesperson or a billable consultant that's on site, you can see that if you pay them X, they're going to make you Y. If you've got someone who's sat on a help desk, you might not be able to quantify the fact that this person suddenly takes your net promoter score from X to Y, or reduces the number of tickets, or improves the customer service, and suddenly you're winning clients just off the back of reputation. So it feels like it's harder to come up with a salary range that you'll pay for a rock star for roles where they're not revenue generating.
Yeah. I see what you're saying there. So Ben, talk to me about the process, because we need a robust process to make sure that we kind of we need a process for everything, really, don't we? But what's the key steps that we need to take forwards in this place then?
Yeah, and I think the process can vary from client to client. It's got to fit for the business, and it's got to be right for that business and for the role that you're recruiting. So I think the individual steps aren't necessarily, you don't need to be in a set order, but what you've got to do is make sure that at the beginning of that recruitment cycle is that you work out what your process is, and then you stick to it rigidly. Yeah. So, is it a first stage brief interview with a couple of tech questions followed by a more formal interview? Is it a one stage process? Again, like there's kind of pros and cons to those different things, but what the candidates want is clarity on what that process is going to be. And I think it's important then that you stick to that and you live up to that. So if someone has a bad interview experience, they'll walk away and tell 10 friends. If they have a great interview experience, they might not even get the job, but they will still go and tell their friends. So you can end up rejecting people that go away and speak about you in a really positive way. But as long as you've got that process right, and we're happy to kind of sit and advise as to what that can be for an individual business. But really, I think the whole point of that is it should be tailored, and it should fit in with the timescales and the diaries of the people that are involved in that process.
No, that's cool. That's great. And I think it's important, because there's so many people who don't have an interview process. They just sort of think, we'll get someone in, have a chat. Did they work out? We won't score them. And then they end up in trouble because they haven't scored them properly, and all sorts of other things like that. Heard that a few times before. John, talk to me about the difference between the kind of MSP world and what people would normally consider to be like a corporate recruitment process.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, corporate organizations have very established recruitment process now. They have internal recruitment teams. one of the downsides of that is often means they keep people a long way away from the business until the very last moment, or maybe to interview.
Right.
And candidates really don't like that. It's one of the biggest gripes is, that they don't feel like they're actually getting to engage with the people who are fair and right to judge them. And they don't really get buy-in or understanding of what that area does, what's their projects, what are they. MSPs have an opportunity, especially at the moment, to really, if they get it right, if they do these things we talked about, that they can get their story right, they can give content up front on what makes it interesting, they can demonstrate the personalities that they'll be involved in, they can make it quick, they can have a clear process, they will differentiate themselves and make them more appealing to individuals than corporate organizations. At the moment, people are probably feeling more exposed and more unloved by corporate companies than they ever have done, because change is coming. That's the viewpoint, that's the fear. Is cost cutting going to be a result of that? MSP feels like an environment where your value is appreciated more, your individual impact is recognized more, and it feels more rewarding. So it's an opportunity in the current climate to stick yourself out there as an MSP and tap into that emotive aspect. It's not all about money, and get those process parts we talked about right, and you can attract people away from those big brand names.
And I think that the thing I'd just add to that is, we talk a lot about, particularly when clients first start with the mastermind program, around the niche, around their speciality, the specialism that they're working in. Everyone says, we do all the same things. You don't do all the same things. And the one thing that customers look for is how you do it. It's how you deal with an issue when it comes up. It's how you connect. It's how you, engage with us, how you provide reports, how the customer service and all of those sorts of things. And if you call it the GLA way, or you name it, then it actually becomes a thing where they go, if you're trying to compare it with somebody else. And I think that's a really great point you raised there, John, about, they corporates want to keep them away from it. But the more and more you get people involved in the business, at an early stage, then you'll be able to know whether or not you're a right fit. Because that's really what we're talking about here, is make sure you're getting the right fit on both sides of it. So,
can I add one more point on that then?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think that I've made 2 points actually. One is, one of the biggest changes we're seeing in people as a result of this year is that their buying motives, their reasons for, they're looking for different things. If anything, people are self-reflecting more. They want more than just turning up and getting a paycheck, and that comes from their personal value. And I think a lot of people are recognizing that in themselves a lot more. And the other thing, you made a statement there that customers look for what your process is, how you deliver it.
Yeah.
If you can start to think in your hiring process as the candidates you're trying to attract almost get the same treatment as a customer, and you're trying to bring them in and get them to buy into that, then you're going to be a good step ahead of a lot of other people.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to sourcing and selection. So we've got our process right. We've got everybody kind of in the right place. What's the key things around finding the right people? How do we find the right people? And then how do we make that all important decision to select them, to move them to the next logical step? Easy for you to say.
I think with that, first of all, you've got to make sure that you've got the resources available. You've got to make sure that, if it's the MD or owner making the decision to hire and they're going to be engaging with line managers or, kind of heads of, they've got to make sure that everyone's on page, they've got the resources, they're able to commit the time to the process. If not, it's just not going to work and everyone's going to end up disappointed. Then I think you need to think about what those sources are, so companies are going to have great networks, and if you've got someone in your network that can come in and join you and you've got someone that can kind of tap them up and have a chat, that is an absolutely fantastic way to hire. You need to look at things like social media as well. You can look at job boards. I mean, we personally recommend that companies don't go directly to the job boards. They're expensive, and also they've not necessarily got the right tools to be able to kind of go through and interrogate that database. They're not quite sure necessarily what they're looking for. And then obviously there's us agencies at the end. Now, clearly we would want to work with other MSPs. So, there's a sell for us here, but it's about thinking about what you need and how then you're going to attract that person. And it may be that you don't need to use an agency. So, there's some balance there as well.
Anything for you on this one, John?
Just to re-emphasize the bit about utilizing your own networks, make it appealing for your current employees to want to bring other people into the business. Again,
yeah, great point.
Big companies incentivize it through cash, which is great. You know, I'm not going to lie, it's going to help. But at the same time, go out, try and engage your employees, talk to them about the kind of people you want, talk to them about how you value them, and you will value people that they recommend. You know, again, use that first and foremost. And I think in terms of LinkedIn as a platform, if you have a marketing presence, you know, if you are using social media in a pretty strong way, then absolutely use that for your recruitment. Don't go and don't go and use a paid advertising slot for it. It's not required. Create a video content about the job, post it out through it. You know, make it short, sharp, snappy. If it says that you're hiring, it's got your company brand on it rather than an agency, and it tells a bit about the job to get someone engaged, that will spread. People will spread it naturally, and you will get applicants through that method. If you put it onto a paid slot on the LinkedIn job section, it gets lost in amongst thousands now. And in truth, our experience is you get a lot of irrelevant applicants, and then your time is sucked massively again, you know. So in your own direct stuff, try and do it targeted, try and use networks, you know, but really invest in them and do it properly. And then on the recruitment front, it is know what you're looking for. There's a lot of bad rep for recruiters. There's a lot of bad recruiters, but there's also some really good ones. Challenge them. You know, we're doing some content at the moment, which will be released, but hold those recruiters to account. Do they save you time? Do they represent your brand well? Do they give you value? Do they give you quality, and how? And if you do that at the front end, I'm sure you will be happy with the service you get at the back end. That would be all I have to say on that.
No, that's cool. And what about kind of technical tests? What's the, you know, do you, at what point, you know, we talked about the values and the culture and that sort of thing. At what point do you test their technical ability?
Yeah, again, I think as long as you're clear on what you want to achieve with that, you could vary it. You can kind of get, along with the CV, you can get agencies to actually technically vet the candidates and put that on a video. Now, obviously, as a recruiter, I'm not an expert network engineer. So am I going to understand the intricacies of that question that I'm asking that candidate? It's unlikely. What I'll be doing is trying to get a feel for how the candidate answers that question, sorry. And as I say, if it's on video, it's easier then for the line managers to do that. I think the one thing we would say with a technical test is try and avoid too lengthy a test, and also try and avoid a test that's too specific to your business. You know, if there are multiple ways of solving a problem, just because you do it in this particular way doesn't mean it is the only way. I think what you're trying to judge is how does a person problem solve, and what is their methodology behind that. And as I say, going back to the length of test, we had one company that wanted to do like a 5-hour test with a candidate. Now, again, I think if you're a busy person, you're probably going to be slightly put off by the thought of sitting there and doing a 5-hour technical test just so that you can land yourself an interview. So I think it's kind of the length of the test, when in the process, and what you're actually asking. I think are probably the three key things there for me.
There has been a tendency for some organisations in the past to try and put a technical test out there at the front end to eliminate people. In my opinion, it's completely the wrong time to do it. It comes back to what's the experience that candidate's getting. It immediately doesn't feel human. You know, immediately they're being held to account on almost an academic test, right? So bring them in, engage them, ask them some questions, technical based questions in a human interaction. And then once you've got them to start feel like, actually, this company's invested time in me, then maybe ask them to do a test, like based around what everything Ben said, but they'll be more willing to put their real effort into that to make, to really give you the best of them, because you've given them something at that point in time.
I think that's a really great point. And you could, you know, we know what tech types of people are like. They're very data driven. They're very process driven. They need to understand what's going on, where, when, and how. But we go back to why people buy the service from you. It's because of how you do it, not what you're doing. You know, all they want is their computers to be, you know, their network to be stable, the internet to be fast, everything to work, and then they're succeeding. You know, and this just boils down into everything that you do kind of within the organization. Okay, let's move on to the interview now. Most interviews now are taking place over Zoom. face-to-face is creeping back in a little bit more now, over the phone. What's the ultimate or the optimum way to start the interview process where you're making that connection with the candidate?
Yeah, I think the key thing really is to make them feel relaxed. You're going to get the best out of people if you can, have a little bit of a chat to begin with. Now, in terms of format, again, I think there's a lot of variety that customers will have. I think probably a CV walkthrough to begin with is enough time to get the candidate kind of relaxed and into it, so that you can then do more of the digging later on. So for me, that's the way I would like to approach an interview, and that's the way I would like to be interviewed. But it's difficult over Teams and Zoom. You're not meeting the person face to face. You can't quite see the body language. So you've got to pay more attention to the words that are being said rather than the way the person's coming across. So yeah, it's an interesting time, and I think clients are still learning this. They're still trying to learn the best way to interview. And we had someone recently, and even after a second interview, said, "I'd really like to go in and see the office." So again, if you go back to that kind of marketing content and what you've got, is there just a brief snapshot of what the office looks like? It's not perfect, but it's better than someone sitting there and just seeing someone in their living room doing the interview and then wondering what's it actually like to be there. But I think for me, really, CV walkthrough to begin with. And then we can kind of look at performance-based or competency-based interviews, which, do you want to expand on that, John?
It's something we encourage. Standard competency-based questions we feel are becoming a little bit dated, and I think people struggle to interpret the outputs from them, if they're very generic. Performance-based ones are the same concept. You still answer it in the same sense of a star, the situational aspects of how you respond to it, what, where, when, how was that delivered. But it's a question which has got, talk to me about something in relation to this role which you have done in an organization already, and ask them to draw from their existing experience in that way, but make it something relevant to the role you're talking about and what will be their world and what they're used to. Because again, you get the best performance from a candidate when they're relaxed, when they're, the old school days of interrogating someone and thinking that's a great success as an interview. I think there's enough, work being done into profiling people. You don't get the best out of people. So try and make them feel like they're in a natural environment. And so performance-based questions around things that are relevant to them will get that from them. I also think this is a point. Think about the person who's interviewing them from your side. Some people just aren't good. If they're awkward and uncomfortable on video themselves, the person who is being interviewed by them, they're going to be awkward, and it's going to be a really horrible experience. So you've got to at least have someone as part of that process who can put people at ease, who's got a smile, who can make small talk at the beginning, because that's what you're trying to get people down to a level where they can breathe normally, they can relax, and they can almost let their guard down, and you'll see the best of them in that sense. So think about the person. It doesn't necessarily always have, the line manager can be there, but is there someone who can sit alongside them? In terms of the platforms, I actually think I'd question why people would do phone interviews now. It's less adequate, it's less valuable than a video one, because with video you get at least a bit of human interaction, a bit of feedback type thing. And the only other pointer I'd make about the process is use the first 5 minutes for you to talk about, as the interviewer, talk about yourself, talk about the company. Let that person again feel like they're learning a bit about you, and it's a two-way process. Because again, all of that will put them at ease. That will then, in theory, get you a better outcome. You'll get a better insight. You'll see the real them rather than just the interview profile of them. And you should hopefully be able to make a decision based on better substance and better information.
So just picking out something that you just said there, John, just about the kind of like the profiling. What's your view on personality profiling, DISC profiles, insight profiles, those sorts of things? Where do they fit into this whole process?
I use them myself in hiring. I think, and I believe in this, we used to get presented with it before the interview, but we then went into interviews with a bias, with a preconceived idea.
Okay, yeah.
So actually, what I think is they're useful to be carried out, conduct your interview almost without looking at them, and then afterwards reflect in your feedback process, in your thought assessment process, read the profile and reflect and see, did you see any of the characteristics that you're now reading in the profile enforced and demonstrated, whether they be negative or positive? Because that will allow you to kind of feel like, has it that personality been substantiated? Has it been validated type thing? If you read it beforehand, no matter how hard you try, either one, you'll just pick on the negative bits, which again makes them uncomfortable. And that won't be the bit that necessarily makes them good. It's not healthy to do an interview where you're just trying to find the things they're not good at. You want to get them to really talk about the things they're good at and see what value will that bring to your business and how will that enhance it. And then you can assess yourself whether the negative bits are things that are going to be prohibitive and more powerful than the positives.
And I think the only counter to that is the personality profiles aren't necessarily 100% accurate. So sometimes you could read something and come up with the wrong idea, and it might kind of talk to you about, like, you know, ask them if they've got good organizational skills. So I think as long as you then take that back to a kind of competency question of, like, give me an example of how you organized your day in your previous role, I think you might be able to counter that. But yeah, I think there are pros and cons, as John said, to kind of like, do you look at it before or don't you? Because there might be something at the end of it that you've got a slight concern, when actually, if you had probed it a little bit more, maybe you'd have actually got a different answer.
I guess the best way to get the best out of that situation is to, you know, be aware of it, but, you know, conduct that first interview, then review it, and then at a second interview, you can then, you know, drill it any further if you need to in terms of that.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
John, any final thoughts on the interview process?
Yeah, I think a really important bit to cover is, no matter how much you try, people will have conscious or unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So you need to prep in the sense of agreeing a scorecard-based decision process at the beginning before you start, because you want, for your own sake, you want as much consistency as you possibly can in the assessment of people. And you want to be able to justify it. I'm not worried about the legal part. Yes, that could be a factor, but for your best outcome, you need to have that consistency. And the only other point I would say is, your part in the interview process is not just the time you spend chatting to them, it's also the experience they have afterwards. So again, you can differentiate, block time very quickly after an interview to carry out the process of assessing it, and give the candidate a sense of urgency in the feedback and how quickly they receive it, whether that's a negative or not. Again, it goes back to Ben's point. You always want to leave them walking away with a positive impression, because they might not be the right hire, but the next person they speak to might be. Yeah,
that's a really valid point. And then leading that process all the way up into the onboarding process, which is
a whole nother thing. Yeah.
Look, guys, thanks ever so much for your time today with this podcast. There's absolutely little value bombs and golden nuggets all over the place. So I really urge everyone listening to this to go back and listen to it again. Take your notepad and pen out. The guys are here to help you out. So any final thoughts from yourself, Ben?
No, I think it's just, if you want to get in touch, our website's jlaresourcing.co.uk, and you can contact either myself or John, through LinkedIn. Mobile numbers are readily accessible on the website as well. So we'd love to have the opportunity to help. It doesn't need to be for live current roles. We're happy to kind of talk customers through a recruitment process and help them out with that as a value add. So anything like that, we're more than happy to chat.
That's brilliant, Ben. Anything for you, John?
Only to say that if it's worth engaging with a good, trusted recruitment agency, but use them as well for the bit we talked about how to do your own part well first. If you've got the right partnership, they will support you in that. If they're the right people and they have the right values, they'll support you with that, because then in return, they know you're going to commit properly to them when you do use them. And that's how we operate. And I know others in the industry do as well. So I'd encourage them to ask them more from any suppliers they might use. Because
it's not just about, the dog's not just for Christmas. It's not just about finding that one person, is it? It's about the whole process and the whole, making sure that they're feeling loved and welcome into the business as well, and stay there for a long time. So look, guys, thanks ever so much. I think our Neapolitan version of the podcast worked rather well, which was great. So I'm going to wish you all a great end of your Friday, as it is over here, and have a great weekend. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Cheers for that.
So thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, it'd be absolutely amazing if you could go and leave us a rating and review. That would be really great. And in the meantime, I really look forward to connecting with you on person. Go and download the IT Experts app on the platform of your choice. Come and attend one of our Q&As, come and attend one of our masterclasses. And I really look forward to helping you with your business growth challenges to building that profitable IT and MSP business this year.